What happens when royal privilege meets Hollywood grace on live television? When entitlement crashes headfirst into genuine compassion? In just 37 seconds, one heated exchange would expose the true character of a former royal and leave viewers shocked at what they witnessed. It only took one comment about charity work to trigger an explosive outburst that would end with security being called and a guest being escorted off the set of America's most-watched daytime talk show. The View studio was buzzing with anticipation that Tuesday morning. The bright lights reflected off the polished table as the familiar theme music faded out. Whoopi Goldberg sat in her usual spot, shuffling through her index cards with that knowing smile she always wore before a big interview. Joy Behar was already cracking jokes with the studio audience during the commercial break, while Sunny Hostin reviewed her notes one final time. But today was special. Today, two of the most talked about women in the world were sharing the same stage. Angelina Jolie, the Academy Award-winning actress and humanitarian, sat poised and elegant in her tailored black blazer. Her calm demeanor radiated the confidence of someone who had spent decades not just in front of cameras, but working tirelessly behind the scenes to make the world a better place. Across from her sat Meghan Markle, the former Duchess of Sussex, fidgeting with her pearl bracelet and constantly checking her reflection in the studio monitors. Her designer outfit screamed expensive, but something about her energy felt off, restless, like she was waiting for her moment to shine, regardless of what anyone else had to say. And we're back in 5, 4, 3. The floor director counted down with his fingers, and suddenly the red recording light blazed to life. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi began with her signature warmth. "We're here with two incredible women who have used their platforms to create real change in the world. Angelina Jolie, who has spent over 20 years as a goodwill ambassador and special envoy for the UN Refugee Agency, and Meghan Markle, the former working royal who has been vocal about various social causes." Angelina smiled graciously and nodded toward the camera. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi. It's always a pleasure to be here." Meghan straightened in her chair, her media-trained smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Yes, thank you. I'm thrilled to discuss the important work we're all doing." Joy leaned forward with interest. "Angelina, you've literally traveled to war zones and refugee camps around the world. What drives that level of commitment?" Angelina's expression grew serious, her voice taking on a tone that showed just how deeply she cared about her work. "When you witness firsthand the suffering of families who have lost everything, who are fleeing violence and persecution, you realize that having a platform means nothing unless you use it to amplify their voices. I've met mothers who walked hundreds of miles with their children, carrying nothing but hope for a better life. That changes you forever." The studio fell quiet for a moment, the weight of her words settling over everyone present. Even the camera operators seemed to lean in closer. "That's incredibly moving," Sunny said softly. "The work you do with refugees? It's not just photo opportunities or press releases. You're actually there, in the camps, talking to families." "Exactly," Angelina nodded. "Real humanitarian work isn't glamorous. It's sleeping in tents, eating the same food as the families you're visiting, learning their stories, and then fighting like hell to make sure the world doesn't forget about them when the cameras leave." Meghan shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her jaw tightening slightly. She cleared her throat. "Well, I think it's important to note that there are many different ways to create impact. Not everyone needs to physically go to refugee camps to make a difference." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Angelina raised an eyebrow but maintained her composed demeanor. Whoopi, sensing the tension, tried to steer the conversation. "That's true. There are many approaches to activism. Meghan, tell us about the work you're most passionate about." Meghan's posture straightened as she prepared to launch into what sounded like a well-rehearsed speech. "I've always believed in using my voice to speak truth to power. Whether it was my work with UN Women before I was married, or the initiatives I've supported since, I've always focused on empowering women and fighting inequality." Joy nodded politely. "Can you give us some specific examples of projects you've worked on recently?" There was a pause, just a split second, but long enough for everyone to notice. "Well, there's the work we're doing with our foundation. We're developing several exciting initiatives that will launch soon." "But what specific work?" Sunny pressed gently. "Angelina just described sleeping in refugee camps and meeting with displaced families. What does your day-to-day humanitarian work look like?" Meghan's smile became tighter. "I think that's a rather narrow view of what constitutes real humanitarian work. Not all of us can just pack up and fly around the world whenever we feel like it. Some of us have other responsibilities." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Angelina's eyebrows raised slightly, but her voice remained calm and measured. "I understand that people have different circumstances," Angelina replied carefully. "But I should clarify that this work isn't something I do when I feel like it. It's a commitment I made over 2 decades ago, and it requires constant attention, fundraising, advocacy, and yes, being present when families need someone to witness their struggle." "Right, but let's be honest," Meghan interrupted, her voice taking on an edge. "Some people have the luxury of being able to make those kinds of commitments because they don't have the same level of scrutiny or responsibilities that others do." The View panelists exchanged glances. This was not going in the direction anyone had expected. Whoopi jumped in quickly. "I think what's important is that both of you are using your platforms to try to help people. Different approaches, same goal." But Meghan wasn't done. "I just think it's unfair to suggest that flying around taking pictures with refugees is somehow more meaningful than other forms of advocacy. Some of us are dealing with real attacks on our character while trying to do good work." The studio audience began to murmur. Angelina sat perfectly still for a moment, processing what she had just heard. When she spoke, her voice was controlled but firm. "I want to be very clear about something. The work I do isn't about taking pictures. It's about spending weeks at a time in places like Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, documenting human rights abuses, meeting with government officials, and raising millions of dollars for emergency aid. These aren't photo opportunities. They're life and death situations for the families I work with." Meghan rolled her eyes. "Of course you would make it sound so noble." The comment hit the studio like a lightning bolt. Joy's mouth actually fell open. Sunny looked stunned. Even Whoopi, who had seen everything in her decades of television, appeared caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Angelina asked, her composure finally showing the first crack. Meghan seemed to realize she had gone too far, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I'm just saying that some people get praised for their charity work while others get criticized no matter what they do. It must be nice to have universal approval for everything you do." "Universal approval?" Angelina's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "I've been criticized plenty. The difference is that I don't let criticism stop me from showing up for people who need help." "Well, maybe some of us have more at stake than others." Meghan shot back. The tension was now so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Whoopi was frantically looking at her producers through the camera, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage this interview. "Ladies, let's take a step back here," Whoopi attempted. "We're all on the same side." But Meghan was beyond reasoning now. "Are we though? Because I'm sitting here listening to someone lecture me about real humanitarian work when I've been fighting for women's rights and social justice my entire career." Angelina took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her words were measured but devastating. "Fighting for women's rights and social justice is admirable work, but I have to ask, what specific women have you helped? What specific injustices have you corrected? Because I can tell you about Fatima, a Syrian refugee I met last month who now has clean water because of funding we secured. I can tell you about the school we built in Cambodia that's educating 300 girls who would otherwise have no access to education. I can name specific families whose lives have changed because of this work." The studio was dead silent. Meghan's face was flushed, and her hands were trembling slightly. "How dare you?" Meghan whispered, her voice shaking with rage. And that's when everything exploded. "How dare I what?" Angelina asked quietly, her voice carrying the kind of controlled power that comes from years of dealing with world leaders and war criminals. "How dare I ask you to be specific about the work you claim to do?" Meghan's face was now bright red, her carefully constructed media persona crumbling in real time. "You sit there acting like you're so much better than everyone else, like you're the only person who's ever helped anyone." "I never said that," Angelina replied firmly. "I simply answered the questions I was asked about my work. You're the one who decided to turn this into a competition." Joy tried to jump in. "Maybe we should talk about something else." "No," Meghan snapped, whipping around to face Joy with wild eyes. "I'm tired of being talked down to. I'm tired of people acting like my work doesn't matter just because I don't sleep in tents." Sunny looked genuinely concerned now. "Meghan, I don't think anyone is saying your work doesn't matter." "Really?" Meghan's voice was getting higher and more strained. "Because that's exactly what it sounds like. Miss Perfect over here gets to fly around the world playing savior while the rest of us get judged for not doing enough." The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this meltdown unfold in real time. Several people had their phones out, clearly recording what was happening. Angelina remained remarkably calm. "Meghan, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Nobody is judging you. We were simply discussing our different approaches to humanitarian work." Don't patronize me, Meghan hissed. I know exactly what this is. This is the same thing that's been happening to me for years. Everyone acts like I'm not good enough, like I don't deserve to be heard. Whoopi was now openly signaling to the producers, making cutting motions across her throat. But the cameras kept rolling. I think maybe we should take a commercial break, Whoopi suggested firmly. No, Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not done. I came here to talk about important issues, and instead I'm being lectured by someone who thinks camping makes her Mother Teresa. The insult hit the studio like a bomb. Even the camera operators looked shocked. Angelina's composure finally cracked, just slightly. Camping? Angelina's voice was dangerously quiet. Is that what you think I do? Camp out for fun while families flee for their lives? I think you do whatever gets you the most praise, Meghan shot back venomously. It must be so easy to be the perfect humanitarian when you don't have to deal with real criticism or real consequences. That was the final straw. Angelina stood up slowly, her 6-foot frame towering over Meghan when she spoke. Her voice carried the weight of every family she'd advocated for, every child she'd held in refugee camps, every government official she'd confronted about human rights abuses. Real consequences? Angelina's voice was barely above a whisper, but it commanded the entire studio. You want to talk about real consequences? I've been threatened by war criminals. I've had armed guards escort me out of countries because I spoke out against genocide. I've held dying children in my arms and promised their mothers I would make sure the world remembered them. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. I've testified before the United Nations Security Council about mass rape being used as a weapon of war. I've looked survivors of ethnic cleansing in the eye and promised them that their stories would be heard. I've put my life, my career, and my family's safety on the line because some things are more important than comfort or approval. Meghan's face had gone pale, but her anger was still burning bright. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You act like you're the only person who's ever suffered or sacrificed anything. I never said I was the only one, Angelina replied firmly. But I also won't apologize for taking my work seriously or for having concrete results to show for it. Concrete results? Meghan laughed bitterly. What, a bunch of photo ops with poor people? A few schools with your name on them? The audience actually gasped. Joy put her hand over her mouth in shock. Sunny looked like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Angelina stared at Meghan for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was steady but filled with disappointment. Those photo ops you're mocking represent real families. Real children who now have access to clean water, education, and medical care. That school you just dismissed educates 300 girls in a country where women are banned from learning. But more than that, what you just said tells me everything I need to know about how you view the people I work with. Don't twist my words, Meghan said defensively. I don't need to twist anything, Angelina replied sadly. You just called refugee families and survivors of war crimes photo opportunities. You reduced human suffering to a publicity stunt. The weight of what Meghan had just said seemed to hit her, but instead of apologizing or backing down, she became even more defensive. That's not what I meant, and you know it, Meghan said, her voice shaking with rage. Then what did you mean? Whoopi asked pointedly. Because that's exactly what it sounded like to me too. Meghan whirled around to face Whoopi. I meant that it's easy to look good when you're only dealing with people who can't fight back or criticize you. Another collective gasp from the audience. This time, even the crew members were shaking their heads. Angelina closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them, she looked directly at Meghan with something that wasn't quite pity, but close to it. Meghan, the families I work with aren't voiceless victims who can't fight back. They're some of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever met. They've survived things that would break most of us. They don't need me to speak for them. They need me to make sure others listen when they speak for themselves. Oh, please, Meghan rolled her eyes again. Save the inspirational speech. That was it. Joy had had enough. Okay, hold on, Joy said firmly, her Brooklyn accent coming out in full force. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes watching you insult and belittle someone who has dedicated her life to helping people. What exactly is your problem? Meghan turned her fury on Joy. My problem is that I'm tired of being judged by people who don't understand what it's like to have every single thing you do picked apart and criticized. But that's exactly what you're doing to Angelina right now, Sunny pointed out. You're picking apart and criticizing her life's work. That's different, Meghan said weakly. How is that different? Whoopi asked. Meghan opened and closed her mouth several times, clearly struggling to find an answer that would make sense. "It just is," she finally said. "No, it isn't," Angelina said quietly. "And the fact that you can't see the difference is exactly the problem." Meghan's eyes blazed with fury. "You know what? I don't have to sit here and listen to this anymore. I came here in good faith to have a conversation about important issues, and instead I'm being attacked and humiliated." "Nobody attacked you," Whoopi said firmly. "We asked you about your work, and you responded by attacking Angelina's." "That's not what happened," Meghan insisted. "It's literally exactly what happened," Joy said. "We have it on tape." Meghan looked around the studio wildly, as if she was just now realizing that cameras had been recording every word of her meltdown. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, grabbing her purse from under the table. "I don't have to put up with this." "Meghan, please sit down," Whoopi said, trying one last time to salvage the interview. "Let's try to have a productive conversation." But Meghan was already backing away from the table, her designer heels clicking on the studio floor. "Productive conversation?" She laughed harshly. "There's nothing productive about being set up and humiliated on national television." "Nobody set you up," Angelina said sadly. "You did this to yourself." And with that final, devastating truth hanging in the air, Meghan Markle made the decision that would define this moment in television history. "You know what?" Meghan's voice cracked as she pointed an accusatory finger at Angelina. "You're nothing but a hypocrite. You sit there acting so sanctimonious. But where were you when I was being destroyed by the media? Where was your humanitarian concern then?" The studio fell into stunned silence. Even the producers in the control room seemed frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue. Angelina blinked slowly, processing the bizarre accusation. "Meghan, I don't even know you personally. We've never met before today." "Exactly!" Meghan shrieked, her voice now completely unhinged. "You don't know me, but you're sitting here judging me like everyone else does, acting like you're so much better, so much more worthy." Whoopi stood up from her chair, her voice taking on the authoritative tone that had made her one of television's most respected moderators. "Meghan, you need to calm down right now. This is completely inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Meghan whirled around to face Whoopi, her eyes wild. "What's inappropriate is bringing me on this show just to make me look bad next to Miss Perfect over here." "Nobody brought you here to make you look bad," Joy said firmly. "You're doing that all by yourself." "Don't you dare talk to me like that," Meghan snapped at Joy. "You don't know what it's like to have the whole world watching your every move, waiting for you to fail." Sunny, who had been quiet during most of the meltdown, finally spoke up. "Meghan, Angelina is literally one of the most photographed and scrutinized women in the world. She's been dealing with intense media attention for over 20 years. That's different," Meghan said desperately. "She chose that life. I was forced into it." "You chose to marry into the royal family," Angelina said quietly. "Nobody forced you to do that." "How dare you?" Meghan's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "How dare you stand there and act like you know anything about what I've been through?" Angelina remained perfectly calm, her voice steady and compassionate. "You're absolutely right. I don't know what you've been through, but I do know that attacking other people's humanitarian work isn't going to solve your problems." "I'm not attacking anyone's work," Meghan protested weakly. "You called refugee families photo opportunities," Joy reminded her bluntly. "You said they were people who couldn't fight back. If that's not attacking humanitarian work, I don't know what is." Meghan's face crumpled as she realized there was no way to walk back what she had said. The cameras had captured everything. There would be no editing this out, no spinning it as a misunderstanding. "This is all wrong," she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "This isn't how this was supposed to go." "How was it supposed to go?" Whoopi asked, her voice softer now but still firm. "I was supposed to come here and talk about my work, about the important things I'm doing. Instead, you brought her here to overshadow me." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Angelina looked genuinely hurt for the first time in the entire interview. "Meghan, I was invited to discuss my work with refugees. I had no idea you would be here, and I certainly had no intention of overshadowing anyone." "Right," Meghan said sarcastically. "It's just a coincidence that they put the two of us together." Whoopi's patience finally ran out completely. "Meghan, you're being paranoid, and frankly, you're being cruel. Angelina has done nothing but answer questions about her humanitarian work, and you've responded by attacking her and insulting the people she helps." "I never insulted anyone," Meghan said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You call them photo ops," Sunny said incredulously. "You said they were people who couldn't fight back. How is that not insulting?" Meghan looked around the studio desperately, as if searching for someone, anyone, who would take her side. But every face she saw reflected the same mixture of shock, disappointment, and disgust. "I misspoke," she said finally. "I was upset. I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "But you did mean it," Angelina said sadly. "And that's what makes this so heartbreaking. You meant every word." "No, I didn't," Meghan insisted. But even she seemed to know how hollow her denial sounded. "Meghan," Whoopi said firmly, "I think you need to apologize." "Apologize?" Meghan's voice cracked. "For what?" "For insulting humanitarian work, for attacking a guest on our show, and for completely losing control of yourself on national television." Meghan stared at Whoopi for a long moment, and then something shifted in her expression. The tears dried up, replaced by a cold, hard anger. "I'm not apologizing for anything," she said icily. "I came here to have an honest conversation, and I've been nothing but honest." "If that's your version of honesty," Joy said, "then you have some serious soul-searching to do." "Don't lecture me about soul-searching," Meghan snapped. "You don't know the first thing about what I've been through, and you don't know the first thing about what the refugee families Angelina works with have been through," Sunny shot back. "But that didn't stop you from dismissing them as photo ops." Meghan's face flushed red again. "I'm done with this. I'm not sitting here listening to a bunch of people who don't understand anything about my situation." She started walking toward the edge of the set, but Whoopi's voice stopped her. "Meghan, if you walk out of here now, this is how people are going to remember you. Is that really what you want?" Meghan paused for a moment, her back to the cameras. For just a second, it seemed like she might turn around, might try to salvage something from this disaster. Instead, she spun around to face the cameras directly, her eyes blazing with fury. "You want to know what I want?" she said, her voice rising to a shout. "I want people to stop treating me like I'm some kind of villain just because I refuse to be quiet and grateful. I want the same respect that gets handed to people like her just because they have the right last name or the right connections. Respect is earned," Angelina said quietly. "It's not handed to anyone." "Oh, please," Meghan laughed bitterly. "You were born into Hollywood royalty. You've never had to fight for anything in your life." The studio audience actually groaned at this latest outrageous claim. Angelina's jaw tightened, and for the first time, she looked genuinely angry. "I've fought for everything," she said, her voice steel. "I've fought for my sobriety, for my mental health, for my children, and for the families I work with around the world. I've been criticized, attacked, and threatened more times than I can count. But I've never, ever used that as an excuse to tear down other people or minimize human suffering." Meghan's face went white. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. "Security," Whoopi called out, her voice carrying clearly through the studio. "We need security to escort our guest out." "What?" Meghan spun around, looking genuinely shocked. "You're having me removed. You've made it clear that you can't conduct yourself appropriately," Whoopi said firmly. "This interview is over." Two security guards appeared from the wings, walking calmly but purposefully toward Meghan. "This is outrageous," Meghan protested, backing away from them. "You can't just throw me out." "We absolutely can," Joy said. "This is our show, and you've been completely out of line." The security guards reached Meghan, and one of them spoke quietly to her, too low for the microphones to pick up. "Don't touch me," Meghan said loudly, jerking away from them. "I'll leave on my own." She grabbed her purse and started walking quickly toward the exit, the security guards flanking her on either side. But as she reached the edge of the set, she turned back one final time, pointing at Angelina with pure venom in her eyes. "This isn't over," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the studio. "People will see through this eventually. They'll see who you really are." And with that final, desperate threat, Meghan Markle stormed off the set of The View, leaving behind a stunned studio, a heartbroken humanitarian, and a moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. Angelina sat back down slowly, her hands shaking slightly as the reality of what had just happened settled in. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly to the panel. "I never intended for any of this to happen." "This wasn't your fault," Whoopi said firmly. "You handled yourself with incredible grace under completely inappropriate circumstances." The studio audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation for Angelina's dignity in the face of such an ugly attack. But Angelina didn't smile or wave. She just sat there, looking deeply sad about what she had witnessed, about the pain and anger that had just exploded across their stage. As the cameras finally cut to commercial, one thing was crystal clear to everyone who had witnessed this extraordinary meltdown. They had just seen the real Meghan Markle, and it was nothing like the carefully crafted public image she had spent years building. In just 37 seconds of uncontrolled fury, She had revealed exactly who she was underneath all the designer clothes and media training, and America would never forget what they had seen.